Let's do 1 minute of silence and then let's begin in time. Okay. So we are on the third chapter. Huh? Let us just go through the aim of doing this whole thing again. You all are, especially my dear Saransh, Krinali, Mrityunjay, all the students of Jaipuria school who are studying the Gita, you all are already past masters in the Gita. Arya, you all understand the Gita backward, forward, verse, anywhere, and you all will recite it, explain the meaning, give references. I totally understand. So why should Anjali ma'am be doing the Gita with children who already know the Gita? So we are doing the Gita with you all. So you get to see another point of view. The point of view of Sri Aurobindo. Yes. Because we are all very scientific. We must be scientific in our nature. ये नहीं कि एक पढ़ लिया समझ गए दरवाजा बंद दिमाग का दरवाजा बंद ना we are going to keep our mind open and understand more and more points of view, at least Sri Aurobindo's point of view, because I feel that after reading so many Gitas, Tilaks and Gandhiji's and so many Chinmayananji's, I realized that it is only after reading Sri Aurobindo's Gita that all the queries in my mind regarding life, regarding action, regarding the aim of life, all got clarified only after reading Sri Aurobindo. So I really wanted to share that with you, and that is the reason we are doing it. Now we've done, since the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita is called Karma Yoga. So let us again and again go through the 3 steps of Karma Yoga before we proceed with the verses. I know we have done this earlier, but repetition makes it absolutely embedded in our mind. The first step of Karma Yoga is that when we analyze our actions, we find that the basic orientation of most of our actions is towards the Saransh, towards the result.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
We think about what we will get from this karma.
By the action, what will
Yes,
be the result that I will accrue out of it.
Yes, ma'am.
Therefore, if we can control this orientation towards the result, if we will be able to deal with our actions in the best possible manner. Therefore, in the first step of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna told us in the second chapter, Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You have a right to action, but only to action, never to its fruits. Now, later on in the Gita, we will see that even this right to action he is going to take away from us. अभी शुरू में भुलाने के लिए फुसलाने के लिए उन्होंने कहा you have a right to action but not to the fruits. ठीक है, तो फ्रूट वाला जो टाइट गांठ है उसको ढीला करना शुरू किया. But he realizes that when I take the orientation towards the fruit away from the doer, then what will happen? The doer may even resist from the action. So in the very second line, what does he say? Saransh, what does he say?
माते संगोस्व कर्मणि, तुम्हारी कर्म ना करने की भी आसक्ति ना हो, मतलब तुम्हारा ये हट भी ना हो कि मैं कर्म नहीं करूंगा.
हाँ, माँ कर्म फल हेतुर भूर्मा ते संगोस्व कर्मणि. So let not the fruit of your works be your motive. Neither let there be in you any attachment to inactivity. Now, this is the first step. What is the second step of Karma Yoga? In the second step of Karma Yoga, Sri Krishna says, connect with me. Connect with me in all that you are thinking. Connect with me in all that you're feeling, all your emotions. All your emotions, they may be good, they may be bad, they may be ugly, they may be positive, they may be negative. But connect with me in all that you feel, all that you think, all that you feel. Connect with me in all that you do. Invite me into all your actions. Offer all your actions, all your thoughts, all your feelings, all that you think, feel, and do. all that you offer to me. Which verse in the Gita says this? Which student of mine will tell me? It's in chapter 9. इसको याद है? Chapter
यत्
9.
करोषि यदश्नासि यत् जुहोषि ददासि यत् यत् तपस्यसि कौन्तेय
तत्कुरुष्व मदर्पणम्. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yat karoshi yadashnasi. Yat juhoshi dadasi yat. Yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushva madarpanam. Whatever thou doest, whatever thou enjoyest, whatever thou sacrifice, we can use another word, whatever thou offer to me, whatever thou givest, whatever energy of tapasya, of the soul's will or the soul's effort thou puttest forth, what should you do with it? Make it an offering unto me. Shri Krishna says, जो भी तुम सोच रहे हो, जो भी तुम इमोशन फील कर रहे हो, जो भी तुम कर रहे हो, सब मुझे ऑफर करो. कहने का मतलब है, खाना खा रहे हैं, अपने सामने प्लेटर आया, मैं बोला हे कृष्ण, ये सब आप हैं, मैं आपको खा रही हूँ, और ये जो एनर्जी खा रही है, ये एनर्जी भी आप हैं, जो खा रही है वो भी आप हैं, तो आपको ऑफर करती हूँ. आप शावर ले रहे हैं, वो जल, वो कृष्णा का, प्रकृति का इतना तेज रूप है, और वो जल जब आप हैं तो मेरे को सोख कर रहे हैं. कपड़े पहन रहे हैं तो आपको पहन रहे हैं, कुछ कर्म करने जा रहे हैं तो आपके लिए कर रहे हैं. हर चीज में उनसे जुड़ते जाना है, उनको इनवाइट करते जाना है. एंड यू नो व्हाट, दिस वाज द 27th verse of the 9th chapter. Now in the very next verse, Shri Krishna says that if you offer all that you're doing, all that you're feeling, all that you're thinking, all that if you offer to me, फिर क्या होगा? You will be liberated from all good and evil results. Liberation. जीवन मुक्ता किसको कहते हैं?
शुभ फलैरेवं मोक्ष से कर्म बंधन.
हाँ, समझाओ, बताओ.
कि तुम इस शुभ और अशुभ से, मतलब जो भी सही गलत, इन सब से तुम मोक्ष से, कर्म बंधन नहीं, कर्म बंधन से तुम मुक्त हो जाओगे. क्योंकि कर्म का बंधन तभी होता है जब कर्म में डिजायर्स होती हैं, कर्तृत्वाभिमान, मतलब मैं डूअर हूँ, ये भाव होता है, ईगो होती है, अटैचमेंट होता है, उसके फ्रूट की तरफ जब हमारी दृष्टि होती है, कर्म पर ध्यान नहीं होता है, तो जब ये सब हमने छोड़ दिया तो फिर कर्म बंधन कहाँ से होगा? तो वो कर्म ही हमारे अकर्म बन जाएंगे.
बहुत सुंदर, very सुंदर. In other words, what Shri Krishna is saying, that you will not be bound by the action. Why? Because your soul will have woven a constant union with me through your continuous offering. In all moments of your waking, you remember me and you offer what you are doing to me. Through that renunciation, through that offering, you will become free and you will attain to me. So the very next verse is, who wants to say that verse? 28th verse of the 9th. Shubha Shubh. Shubha Shubh Falay Revam Moksha se Karma
Bandhanai Sannyasa Yoga Yuktatma Vimukto Mahopashyasi.
Very beautiful. So the second step of Karma Yoga involves the simple offering of all our karma to the divine. And not only an offering, but an invitation to the divine. You lead the way. You work through me. Use me as your instrument. Just to remind you that even when we are thinking, that is a karma. Even when you're feeling an emotion, it is part of the karma, the gamut of karma. So the second step will gradually and spontaneously lead us towards the third step of Karma Yoga. There he will even take away the right to action from us, right? So before moving to the third step of Karma Yoga, let us first understand what are those two strands to which our actions are connected. The first we've understood, the first strand was desire. And so that Sri Krishna loosened when he said that you don't think about the fruit of your action. The second step, the second thread of our action, what our action is tied to, is always connected to the I. I am the doer. I am doing it. This is the second element of action. Desire and ego generally go together with every ordinary action. So, in the third step of Karma Yoga, Sri Krishna says, you are the doer. This is your ignorance. When you think that I am the doer, it is your ignorance. The work is actually done. Now, Sri Krishna says the work is actually done by my Prakriti. And Prakriti is my machinery. It is working as per my sanction. You are only a small cog in the wheel. So, just repeating, in the first step of Karma Yoga, eliminate the desire for fruit. In the second step of Karma Yoga, connect with God. Offer the action you are doing and invite Him into all your actions, small actions, big actions, all actions. And in the third step of Karma Yoga, eliminate the ego of the doer. Realize that this whole movement of Prakriti is not an independent Prakriti, as the Sankhya says, that Prakriti is independent. Prakriti is not independent. Sri Krishna says, Prakriti is my machinery. If I am He, it is mine. This is the feminine aspect of me, the Shakti. And this Prakriti is the Prakriti which proceeds from the Supreme Lord, although through a veil, although through a covering. Trace all your actions upwards to their origin. And when you reach the origin, you find that there is a supreme power which is acting through you. You will start connecting the dots together. In the Supreme Lord's action, you will see that there is neither ego nor there is desire. When we become pure instruments of that action, the action of the Lord, His action will proceed through us, and this action will not touch us. Na karma lipyate nare. ईशावास्य उपनिषद सेकंड वर्स. कभी ना कभी हम लोग ईशावास्य उपनिषद भी करेंगे. थोड़ा डिफिकल्ट है बट करेंगे. ईशा उपनिषद says, if we do action with offering, then the action will not bind us. Na karma lipyate nare. So the third step of Karma Yoga is to apply the knowledge that all actions proceed from the Supreme Lord, although through a veil. All actions proceed from the Lord, but that action is not the action of desire. It is not the action of ego, but it is a pure action. Divyam karma. Now, we always say that the divine has no desire and the divine has no ego. Let us understand desire. We have to understand anything to be able to eliminate it from us. What is desire? Desire is a movement to grasp. What do you want to grasp? What you do not possess. What we are lacking, we want to grasp. What we already possess, what is our movement towards it? That I am either keeping this here, and because, oh no, I don't like this place, I will put it here. What we already possess, we may keep it here, we may keep it there. It is all ours. The Supreme Lord already possesses everything. By definition, He is the all possessor. He simply arranges and He rearranges. आज उसके पास है, कल उसके पास पहुंच गया. That is Sri Krishna's play. That is Sri Krishna's Leela, right? The idea is that when you possess everything, there still remains an action. ये नहीं कि अब सब कुछ हम possess करते हैं तो there is no action left. And that is the action of the Lord. That is the Leela of the Lord. He is the all possessor. Sri Krishna says that it is our ignorance that tells us that we do not possess this or that. In reality, it is a kind of a veil of ignorance which tells us this is not ours, that I want to possess. We harbor in ourselves all kinds of jealousies, all kinds of strife. In reality, we are portions of the divine. What does he say in the 15th chapter, second verse? He says, Ansha Matra Sanatana. And before the Ishavasya Upanishad begins, there is the most famous, beautiful verse, Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. He is Purna. And that Purna has become many Purnas. Within each one of us, there is that Purna. The Supreme Divine is within us. And the Supreme Divine is the All-Possessor. Therefore, what is it that we do not have? What is it that we do not have? Where is the place of desire? Where is the place for grasping at things? In this wide world, everything is available. It is with him. He is also me. Our ignorance of this knowledge keeps us narrow. And what do? We try to elbow out others. We don't have to live in the small world that we believe is our world. This whole universe is our world. The all-possessor lives within us. He possesses us. And he is within us, so we are him. We are him ना, ये तो हम लोगों ने पहले देख लिया. अगले जन्म में हम क्या होने वाले हैं? What is going to continue? It is the soul that is going to continue. तो कौन है हम? I am that. Tattvamasi. Right? Attainment of this knowledge gives us a perfect mastery over things, a perfect mastery over actions. Thereafter, we do actions not because we want to possess something, not because we want to grasp something. Why do we want to do actions? Because there is a massive movement of Prakriti, massive movement of action arising out of the all-possessor. And we are aspiring to become the perfect instrument of that all-possessor. We must aspire to participate in his action. And that is the reason we are taking part in this mighty action of the all-possessor. Then there will be no my action or his action, my possession or her possession, because our knowledge will tell us that all possessions are possessions of the all-possessor. So, after giving this brief introduction, I would like to continue with the verses. In our last session, we did verses 1 to 3 of the 3rd chapter. Just to refresh our memory, in the 1st and 2nd verse, Arjun had put forth his confusion to Sri Krishna. And he said that if Sri Krishna feels that Gyan Yoga is greater than karma, why is he appointing Arjuna to such a terrible work, to such a terrible battle? Ghora Simam, why are you putting me to such a work? Arjun requests Sri Krishna to clarify his doubt in clear terms. He's his friend. And he tells him, look, Krishna, I don't want any confused and mingled speech. I want very clear words from you telling me what is more important, Gyan Yoga or Karma Yoga. Now in the 3rd verse, Sri Krishna starts his answer by saying that in this world, there are 2 ways followed generally to enter into the Brahmic sthiti. One is the way of Sankhya. Now, Sankhya leads through the path of inaction to the Brahmic sthiti. But this is not the way of the Bhagavad Gita. Though Sri Krishna takes a few things from Sankhya and synthesizes them in the Bhagavad Gita's way, but he doesn't take all of Sankhya. So he says there is one way of Sankhya which leads through the path of inactivity to inactivity, and they call that inactivity as a Brahmic sthiti, that the Brahmic sthiti can be attained only if through the path of inaction. But Sri Krishna says there is another way, the way of Karma Yoga, which is the way of action, but not ordinary action. This is Karma Yoga. And that is why we went through the 3 steps of Karma Yoga, just to refresh your memory. And that is the method that Sri Krishna will profess through the Bhagavad Gita. Now let us proceed with the fourth verse. Who would like to recite the fourth verse? Prinali. Okay.
न कर्मणामनारम्भात् नैष्कर्म्यं पुरुषोऽश्नुते न च सन्न्यसनादेव सिद्धिं समधिगच्छति.
Very nice. So Sri Krishna says, not by abstention from works does a man enjoy actionlessness. So he says actionlessness we have to reach, but actionlessness does not mean inaction. So he says not by abstention from works, not by stopping works will you reach Naishkarmya, actionlessness, nor by mere renunciation of works. कि हमने संन्यास ले लिया, हमने कर्म को त्याग दिया. Will he attain to his perfection? Now, when he says the word perfection, that is what he has defined Siddhi as. We must remember. Do you remember the fourth house? It is the house of perfection. How does he attain to perfection, to Siddhi? Siddhi has been defined by Sri Aurobindo as reaching a state of perfection in our becoming. So now we will read the footnote. Okay, everybody has the book with them?
Yes, ma'am.
And wherever you have a question, you can stop me, or else we can read through it and then understand it as you feel. So this is a little long footnote. Naishkarmya, a calm voidness from works. So what is it? It is a very calm voidness from works, is no doubt that to which the soul, the Purusha, has to attain.
Ma'am,
Right?
what do you mean by voidness of works over here?
Voidness is an emptiness, but it is a calm emptiness from works, which means that, you know what works involves? Works involve a lot of, there is a general movement towards grasping this, that, all that becomes calm and steady. A calm voidness from works is no doubt that to which the soul, the Purusha, has to attain. For it is Prakriti which does the work. And the soul has to rise above involution in the activities of the being and attain to a free serenity and poise, watching over the operations of Prakriti, but not affected by them. We will read sentences again and again, but we must understand them. See, let me give you the example of Nataraj. You've seen the statue of Nataraj? Every part of it, yes? You've seen the statue of Nataraj in his dance?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Every part of his body is dancing. There is a continuous movement in his whole body. But when you look at his face, there is a complete serenity. He has reached the state of Naishkarmya. The divine action is going through him, but there is a complete serenity in his whole being, because he has become the pure instrument of Prakriti. Right? Now, in the light of that, let us read this sentence again. What has happened? There was involution. We've talked of evolution now. So, involution, the divine involved himself. He became other than himself. He hid his knowledge and he became ignorance. He hid his bliss and he became the opposite of it. He hid his immortality and he became mortal. That is the process of involution. So now what do we have to do? We have to now evolve. We have to again and again become what we initially were, right? So Naishkarmya, a calm voidness from works, is no doubt that to which the soul, the Purusha, has to attain. For it is Prakriti which does the work. Who is doing the work? Prakriti is doing the work. And the soul has to rise above the involution in the activities of the being and attain to a free serenity and poise, watching over the operations of Prakriti. We have to watch that Prakriti is making me do this. Prakriti is arranging that I am propelled into this action. Prakriti is arranging that I'm propelled into that action, but not affected by them. Right? That and not cessation of the work of Prakriti. We don't have to stop the work of Prakriti. We have to reach a calm voidness where there is a calm, there is a serenity, there is a watching, there is a Sakshi Bhav. And I watch the action that the Prakriti is wanting to do through me. And I let that action pass through me by becoming the pure instrument. That and not cessation. We don't stop the work of Prakriti is what is really meant by the soul's Naish-Karmya. Now, what does Sankhya say? Sankhya says, but if the works of Prakriti continue, how can the soul help being involved in them? Sankhya says the soul cannot help being involved in them. How can I fight and yet in my soul not think or feel that I, the individual, am fighting, not desire victory, nor be inwardly touched by defeat? This is the teaching of the Sankhya, that the intelligence of the man who engages in the activities of nature is entangled in egoism, ignorance, and desire, and therefore drawn to action. So, what does Sankhya say? Have you understood? Prinali, Saransh, Arya,
Yes,
please
ma'am.
mute everybody else. Please mute yourself. There's a lot of sound in somebody's. Yeah. Prinali, Saransh, have you understood? Or do
Yes,
you want me
ma'am.
to
Yes,
read
ma'am.
this again?
This is understood.
So according to Sankhya, therefore the giving up of life and works is a necessary part, an inevitable circumstance, and an indispensable last means of the movement to liberation. For Sankhya, the last means of liberation is to give up life, give up works, go to the Himalayas and just do Bhaj Govindam, Bhaj Govindam. This objection of a current logic, even today this logic is going on. Even today there are people, even today most people feel कि अगर मुझे समाधि में जाना है, अगर मुझे स्थित प्रज्ञ बनना है, तो कर्म छोड़ने पड़ेंगे. Even today it is a current logic. This objection of a current logic, the teacher immediately anticipates. Shri Krishna understands कि ये फिर से question करेगा. No, he says, such renunciation, far from being indispensable, is not even possible. Shri Krishna says that it is not indispensable. In fact, it is most easily dispensable. And it is not even possible. Why it is not possible, you all know, but we will understand further. See, Naish-Karmya is a state where the soul is rooted in the divine, and Prakriti does the work through the instruments of our body, emotions, and mind. You know, this reminds us of the word Sthit Pragya, which comes in the second chapter. Let us just take it up for 1 minute. Pragya is intelligence. Sthita is fixed. Yeah, Pragya is even beyond intelligence. It is wisdom or something like that. So, when does our Pragya become sthit? When does it become sthit? Kirit uncle used to tell us, when 3 things happen, we can safely say that we are sthita pragya. We are in a state of sthit pragya. See, it's not sthita. If he wanted to say that action se ruk jao, instead of using sthita pragya, he would have used the word sthita sharira. He didn't use the word sthita sharira. He said the pragya has to be sthit. And Kirit uncle used to say that there have to be 3 conditions. And only after those 3 conditions are met, we can safely say that we are in the state of sthita pragya. First, he used to say, we must be able to perceive the inactive, silent Purusha. And our consciousness must get stationed in the inactive, silent Purusha. At the same time, we must always be aware that Purusha is not only passive. Purusha has a dynamic aspect, and that dynamic aspect is Prakriti. We should not be unaware of Prakriti. It is only that we have to become stationed in the inactive, silent Purusha. Our consciousness has to be stationed. This is the first condition. What is the second condition? The second condition is that we perceive that we have a right only to actions, not to the fruit. And thirdly, and most importantly, the action that flows out of us should be done with full efficiency, one pointedness, and a sense of equanimity and complete kushalta. So when the action that comes out of us should be one pointed, we should be in a state of equanimity, and it should be with kushalta. What was the definition of yoga that Sri Krishna gives in chapter 2, verse 50? Who remembers it?
Samatvam yoga uchyate.
And yoga karmasu.
Karmasu kaushalam.
Yoga karma
Yes. Yoga karmasu kaushalam is one of the definitions given by Sri Krishna for yoga. When we do our karma with complete efficiency, highest perfection, we can safely say that we are doing yoga. So when our consciousness gets rooted in the silent Purusha, when we don't focus on the fruits of action, and when we do our actions efficiently and as perfectly as possible, then we can say that we are reaching the state of Sthita Pragya. Sthita Pragya does not mean becoming actionless. Sthita Pragya is also something like being samadhista. The word samadhi also needs some understanding from us. Samadhi was a word used in Patanjali's Raj Yoga, and Patanjali called it Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And it is supposed to be the culminating point of the yoga of Patanjali. And there, it is supposed to be a state of absolute concentration in which there is no vibration whatsoever. One is supposed to be completely fixed and concentrated upon the object with such an identity that there is no separation from it. There is neither any movement nor any vibration in Patanjali's Nirvikalp Samadhi. Normally, in India today, when people speak of Samadhi, this is the idea that they believe Samadhi is pointing at. On the contrary, if we read the Bhagavad Gita, we find that Sri Krishna hints at Samadhis to be one who, though he is acting, he has no deflection in his consciousness. It's one pointed, because he's not focused on the result. He's sthita. Where is he sthita? He's sthita in the Purusha. And he has reached a state of equanimity, samat. And Prakriti is flowing through him seamlessly, spontaneously. Prakriti is flowing through him. He has become like a receptacle of Prakriti, Shakti, Prakriti, flowing through him. And he has become sthita in the Purusha. Samadhist of the Bhagavad Gita should not be misunderstood for the English word trance. That when Shiva performs the Tandav, when Nataraj does his dance, we just talked about it, every part of his body is in motion. And at the same time, there is a perfect calm on his face. His consciousness is sthita in samadhi, but his dance does not stop. Right?
Ma'am, is Sankhya and Jnana Yoga same, or is there any difference?
No, Sankhya and the Gyan Yoga of Bhagavad Gita are very different. Sankhya is similar to Vedanta, earlier Vedanta, to Advaita there are differences, the Advaita of Adi Shankaraji, but all of them lead to the path of inaction. And that is what Sri Krishna completely weans away from. He says, no. That's the beauty of Bhagavad Gita. It synthesizes. It takes something that's good from Sankhya. It takes something that's good from Vedanta, but it makes its own philosophy, a very beautiful synthesis. I promise you, I will finish the paper one day and I will share it with you all. And once you all have read it, then we will read it together and understand exactly what is Sankhya. What is, not exactly, but to the extent that I have been able to understand it. What is Advaita? What is Vishishta Advaita? And then we will synthesize it with Bhagavad Gita. And we will also find out the contradictions that are in Sankhya, the contradictions that are in Adi Shankara's Advaita. There are many contradictions, and they are not able to answer their own philosophy has contradictions. We must, if we are scientific minded, we must be able to see the philosophy and then be able to see the contradictions that rise in that philosophy. It's not able to answer those contradictions, and take what is best in that philosophy and come back to the Bhagavad Gita, come back to Sri Krishna. Right? All right, Saransh?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now we'll go to the 5th verse of the 3rd chapter. Maybe we are not able to cover too much. Maybe we just cover the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Ma'am, actually, ma'am, I was thinking about Adi Shankaracharya ji. So, ma'am, I was bewildering that, ma'am, he himself did so much work all over India. Ma'am,
Yes.
so, ma'am, he himself is a great big example when we talk about Karma Yoga. So, ma'am, we can't, ma'am, as per me, ma'am, we can't take Adi Shankaracharya ji as he taught us inaction, and he led us to inactionless. But ma'am, he himself did so much work on this spiritual growth of India. And ma'am, because ma'am, I heard a story. Someone asked to Paramahansa Yogananda ji that name 4 people whom you think without this India, this spiritual dharma would not exist. So Ramakrishna Paramahansa ji said that Buddha ji, Adi Shankaracharya ji, Krishna ji, and one more. I don't remember the 4th name. So, ma'am, because ma'am, when we go through these, ma'am, we are all over this spiritual journey of dhyan, of even that what Adi Shankaracharya ji told. If we go in deep of that also, we get that is for our mental being. If we understand those, not for this, when we talk about renunciation, the renunciation should be for this mental being. So, ma'am, I think so, ma'am, everyone that Buddha ji also gave us the mool, the seed of meditation, of dhyan, and Adi Shankaracharya ji also told us numerous things, what I can say and what I can say about Gita, that is just leading me in my life. So, ma'am, this is what I think about Adi Shankaracharya ji. And ma'am, because ma'am, when I was reading this, ma'am, where Sri Aurobindo has talked about Shankar ji and Buddha ji, ma'am, I think, ma'am, he's somewhere saying that they were not correct. But ma'am, from my perspective, I think they were correct at a point. If we see it from a different perspective, they were correct, I think.
Okay, so what I said also was the same thing, Krinali, that we must take the best from them. But
Yes,
we cannot go totally by their philosophy because there are contradictions. And
Yes,
this
ma'am,
is the
yes.
contradiction, the greatest contradiction of Adi Shankara is that while he himself did unbelievable action.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
mean, at the age of 32, he had left his body. And by
Yes.
that age, when there were no rails and no aeroplanes and no cars, he had constructed a mutt in the north, in the south, in the west, in the east.
All 4 directions.
Not all 4. And not only that, he led raging battles against the Buddhists, actual warfare. And he wrote how much text. So we have to be able to see what we can get from Advaita. But when that Advaita says that the divine is actionless, the divine is only passive, that we cannot accept. Because the activity, the action that is this whole universe. Can you tell me how the water comes into your pipe when you have a shower? You use a pump, right? Right or wrong?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
How does the water go into the tree? How does the water go into the coconut? How does it get filled? There's no pump there. Whose action is it? Look at your heart, the greatest pump of all. Whose action is it? Who has devised it all? We can't say that the divine is only passive. The divine is passive and active. So what Sri Aurobindo did not say that Adi Shankara was wrong. Sri Aurobindo said that he was partially right. He was partially, there's lots to take from him, but there's lots that has to be left.
Wherever this word only and only this comes, ma'am, there is a mistake.
Yes, and the part when you make mathas and you monasteries and young people, you get into the monastery to become monks. That is the time when you have to profess action. You have to pump the youth of India into action. And you can't take them young people into the monks and make brahmacharis out of them. What do you know about their swabhava? What do you know about their swadharma at 14 and 15? Sometimes at 9, sometimes at 7. Do you know what is their swabhava? Do you think it is right to make monks out of them? It was wrong. So we must be able to accept what is good. I was just reading the Radha Kripa Kataksha Stotra. I think that's written by Adi Shankara, the Saundarya Lahari. I mean, look at the stotras he's written. Phenomenal. So we must be able to see what is good, and we must be able to see that is which is partially incorrect. And we must be able to look at it and accept that this is wrong or partial. Even what is partial is half correct, half wrong. All right. So now we do the 5th verse of the 3rd chapter. Who is going to read it out? Arya?
Nahi
Yes,
kaschit karamapi jatu tisthasya karmakrit karyate havashak karma sarva prakriti gune.
for none stands, even for a moment, not doing work. Everyone is made to do action helplessly by the modes born of Prakriti. We can never be actionless. Now, should we read the footnote that will explain everything? Everybody has the book with them? Stop me wherever you. So first, let me tell you that there are the Vedas, the Upanishads, and there is the Tantra. Now, Tantra has unfortunately been misused by some people, but the original Tantra is beautiful. The original Tantra talks about Prakriti, about Shakti, and it even gives Shakti a greater place than Purusha. And the same Tantra has been reformulated by Kashmir Shaivism. You can Google and find out what is Kashmir Shaivism. It gives a lot of importance to Shakti. And similarly, the Bhagavad Gita also gives a lot of importance to Shakti, Prakriti. All right? The strong perception of the great cosmic action and the eternal activity and power of the cosmic energy, which was so much emphasized afterwards by the teaching of the Tantric Shaktas, who even made Prakriti or Shakti superior to Purusha, is a very remarkable feature of the Gita.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am, can
Saransh.
you explain this whole paragraph slowly? Because, ma'am, when we were reading in our Gita classes, ma'am, it was getting a little bit tough to understand it.
This whole paragraph or this sentence
Yes,
you're talking?
ma'am,
The whole paragraph.
About
Okay.
Tantric Shaktas also, we were stuck to it. We were not
So we'll have to study Tantra. I'll also have to study more the Tantric Shaktas to explain to you. But you've heard the word Tantra, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Now, Tantra is a very beautiful science. It's a science which gives a lot of importance to Shakti, to Prakriti, to Shakti, and invokes Shakti and rises to Shakti and invites Shakti into them to do the right. The same Tantra has been misused by other people. So we do not have to go that way. Where it has been misused, why should we go that way? But these Tantric Shaktas, Shaktas were those who gave Shakti more importance than even Purusha, right? In the light of this, we will read this again. And all of us understand that there is a great cosmic activity going on. You see, the birds are chirping. They know when to go in the summers, where to go in the winters. They are very clear. The ants know how to build a whole organized life under the floor that we see, under the mud that we see. They have a full organization. The bees have an organization of their own. What is all this? This is all cosmic activity. The divine has become all. The divine has become the ants, he's become the bees, he's become the trees, he's become the air, he's become the 5 elements. He's become the 5 karma. What are those Sankhya ke jo 5 Gyan Indriyas, 5 Karma Indriyas. All that the divine has become. It's a great cosmic action. There is an eternal activity going on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Right? The strong perception of the great cosmic action and the eternal activity and power of the cosmic energy, which was so much emphasized afterwards by the teaching of the Tantric Shaktas, who even made Prakriti or Shakti superior to Purusha, is a very remarkable feature of the Gita. So what Sri Aurobindo is saying, that Gita picks this up from the Tantra. The beauty of Gita is a synthesis. Gita picks something from Sankhya. Gita picks something from Vedanta. Gita picks something from Tantra and synthesizes it all into the concept of the Bhagavad Gita. Understood? Although here in undertone, it is still strong enough, coupled with what we might call the theistic and devotional elements of its thought. So here in the Gita, there may be a little undertone of the importance of Prakriti, but there is still a great importance given to Prakriti in the Gita. So though it is an undertone, it is still strong enough. And what is it coupled with? It is coupled with the theistic and devotional elements of its thought. So much bhakti has been professed in the Bhagavad Gita to bring in that activism which so strongly modifies in its scheme of yoga the quietistic tendencies of the old metaphysical Vedanta. Now, what does Vedanta say? While Sankhya says that Purusha is inactive and Prakriti is an independent power, Vedanta says that all that is changeable, which is moving, all that is like an illusion, Maya. All that is unchangeable, all that is the truth, is reality. Baki, like you see a screen, when you go to a movie hall, there is a screen. So like this is the example that they give the Mayavadis, the Vedantis, that the screen is real, but uske upar jo movie chal rahi hai, wo to unreal hai, to movie hai. Abhi chala di, abhi band kar denge. Similarly, if you can see Anjali, you can see Saransh, you can see Mona ma'am. All this is an illusion because this is changeable. Today there is Anjali, tomorrow there may not be an Anjali. So which means that she's changeable. She's not eternal. Whatever is not eternal is only a Maya. This is the old and the new Vedanta, and this is the Advaita as well. This Mayavad, right? This is old metaphysical Vedanta. I'll read the second sentence again. Although here in undertone, it is still strong enough, the importance to Prakriti, the importance to Shakti, is still strong enough, though it is an undertone. Coupled, what is it coupled with? It is coupled with devotional elements of its thought to bring in that activism which so strongly modifies in its scheme of yoga the quietistic tendencies of the old metaphysical Vedanta. So what the Bhagavad Gita does takes a little from Vedanta also. Man embodied in the natural world cannot cease from action. The man who has come on this world, who has taken a body, he cannot cease from action. Not for a moment, not for a second. His very existence here is an action. The whole universe is an act of God. Mere living even is his movement. The very fact that we are living here is actually a movement of of, who's going to give
God.
me the answer? Of Prakriti, of God's Prakriti. And Prakriti is not independent like the Sankhya say. Prakriti is the divine Shakti, right?
Yes.
Nothing is outside of God's uh, expanse. Everything is part of God's expanse. In fact, in the Gita he says ना कि जो छल है, कपट है, ये भी मैं हूँ, क्योंकि प्रकृति तो कर रही है, right? I allow Prakriti to deviate.
He says
हाँ,
Arjuna, Sat Asat.
हाँ, I allow Prakriti to move away from me. I give her the sanction, right? Now we'll go to the 6th verse. And after that, I think we'll stop and we'll do the 7th and 8th next time. 6th verse, who's going to read out?
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन् इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा मिथ्याचारस्य उच्यते.
Beautiful. Who controls the organs of action, but continues in his mind to remember and dwell upon the objects of sense. Such a man has bewildered himself with the false notions of self-discipline. So whoever tries to control the action, but in his mind is still dwelling on it, such a man has bewildered himself and he has a false notion कि अरे मैं तो self-discipline में आ गया हूँ, right? When we read the footnote, we will understand it even further. See, it is not, I'm reading the footnote, it is not our physical movements and activities alone which are meant by works. By karma, our mental existence also is a great complex action. So to think कि मैंने मीठा छोड़ दिया, अब माइंड में मीठा घूमे जा रहा है, इसका रियल आंसर तो वो 7th और 8th वर्स में देंगे. Very interesting. So it is not our physical movements and activities alone which are meant by works, by karma. Our mental existence also is a great complex action. It is even the greater and more important part of the works of the unresting energy. What is the mind? The mind is the subjective cause and determinant of the physical. हमारे शरीर जो करता है, हमारे इमोशंस जो प्ले करते हैं, गुड बैड अगली, वो सब माइंड के थ्रू हो रहा होता है, राइट? वाइटल के थ्रू हो रहा होता है. वी हैव गेन्ड नथिंग if we repress the effect but retain the activity of the subjective cause. बाहर से स्टॉप कर दिया, दिमाग में चले जा रहा है. इसका बहुत सुंदर आगे कहीं मैंने लिखा है अपने नोट्स में, का बहुत सुंदर एक उपाय है. हमारा माइंड ये सब लोअर चीजों को चाहता है. पर जब वो श्री कृष्ण के चरण का जो डिलाइट है वो जब मिल जाता है ना, एक बार उसका रस मिल जाए, उसका टेस्ट मिल जाए, तो ये जो लोअर डिजायर्स हैं, जो ये लोअर अपना माइंड का जो पुश है, वो सब धीरे धीरे अपने आप छूट जाता है, राइट? आई विल रीड दिस अगेन. It is not our physical movements and activities alone which are meant by works, by karma. Our mental existence also is a great complex action. It is even the greater and more important part of the works of the unresting energy, subjective cause and determinant of the physical. आ गया समझ में? तो आगे पढ़े.
Ma'am, what is the meaning of subjective cause?
What is the cause कि आज हम बाजार गए अपने लिए एक नई साड़ी खरीदने, क्या बॉडी अपने आप चली गई खरीद बाजार? Who caused the body to go to the bazaar to buy another sari when I already have so many saris?
Yes.
What was the cause? It was the mind. तो अगर हमने बाहर से लगा दिया रोक, हम नहीं खरीदेंगे, बट हमारे माइंड में वो डिजायर चले जा रहा है और उसको हम ब्यूटिफाई नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, उसको हम चेंज नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. तभी जब हम लोगों ने 11th चैप्टर का त्याग और संन्यास किया था, संन्यास लेने से क्या त्याग हो गया? नहीं हुआ ना. एवरीबडी शुड सी द मूवी चित्रलेखा. बहुत पुरानी मूवी है. सी इट. यू चिल्ड्रन आर मैच्योर इनफ टू सी दैट मूवी. ठीक है. तो संन्यास लेने से कुछ नहीं होगा जब तक हमारा अंदर का त्याग नहीं आया है. और अंदर का त्याग तब आएगा जब धीरे 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 हमको एक हायर डिलाइट का टेस्ट मिलने लग जाता है. राइट. राइट. सब्जेक्टिव कॉज समझ आ गया. And that subjective cause is also the determinant. It determines what the physical does. Understood, na, Saransh? Krinali?
Yes.
Yeah. We have gained nothing if we repress the effect, but retain the activity of the subjective cause. Effect हमने रोक दिया, but mind में वो activity चलती जा रही है subjective cause की. Mind is a subject. It is the determinant. It is causing the activity to happen. तो जब तक हमें माइंड से उसको वर्कआउट नहीं किया, उसको ईश्वर के चरणों में डाला नहीं, तब तक वो छूटेगा नहीं, रियल नहीं छूटेगा. सिंस द माइंड इज द इंस्ट्रूमेंटल कॉज, सिंस इनएक्शन इज इम्पॉसिबल, व्हाट इज रैशनल देन? देखो, इनएक्शन तो पॉसिबल ही नहीं है. हमको दिनचर्या भी रोज की करनी पड़ेगी. खाना है, पीना है, नहाना है, ये भी तो एक्शन है. So, what is the right way then? The right way is not to leave things, but to do controlled action. The right way is a controlled action of the subjective and objective organism. Subjective is the mind, objective is the emotions and the body. अब हमारी आदत है, किसी ने कुछ बोला, झट से गुस्सा आया, झट से जवाब दे दिया. राइट? झट से हमने रूडली जवाब दे दिया. अब अगर हमने बोला कि अब हम तो बहुत थक गए, आई एम नॉट एबल टू चेंज इट, हम बोलना ही बंद कर देंगे. इज दैट द राइट मेथड? दैट्स नॉट द राइट मेथड. बोलना बंद करने से क्या होगा? अंदर अंदर बोलेंगे, अंदर अंदर गुस्सा दिखाएंगे, बाहर नहीं निकला तो क्या हुआ? कई लोग करते हैं, एक दिन का हमने मौन ले लिया, एक हफ्ते का हमने मौन ले लिया. इससे नहीं होगा. What Sri Aurobindo is saying is the controlled action is important, and that is why unfortunately we won't be able to do the 7th verse. नहीं तो मैंने सोचा था 7th करके छोड़ूंगी. But there are certain things that have been totally misunderstood by the people who have translated the Gita, and that is in the word. When we finish the 6th, then we'll do it. So mind is that which propels the body into action. Even our emotions, our feelings, our anger, our jealousy, our passions are part of the whole gamut of action. So only an outer control on actions will not work. The control has to be extended to the subjective cause as well. क्रीट अंकल बड़ा अच्छा एक एग्जाम्पल देते थे. एक कोई जेंटलमैन थे, मशरूक वाला. अब उनको लगा that he wanted an outer control of his taste buds. And he used to think that when food comes to me, so much rasa comes in me when I look at food, and I desire it, and I don't want to have desire. So he felt that he had started taking great rasa in food. So first of all, unhone bola, let me give up cereals. I will give up cereals, and I will live only on fruits and vegetables. Bahut badhiya. Now when the fruit and vegetable was served to him, again the rasa was coming. And then he thought, this is not right. I will give up fruits also. So he gave up fruits also. Then he started living only on vegetables. But when the vegetables would come and he is hungry, what will happen? There's a lot of rasa. Because he is honest to himself. It's not an outer control कि मैंने cereal छोड़ दिया, मैं कभी नहीं खाऊंगा. No. तो उनको तो vegetable भी खाएं तो उनको realize हुआ, मेरे को तो वो रस तो आ रहा है. Then he gave up all vegetables, started having only karela, bitter gourd. And he realized when he was hungry, and even there was rasa in the karela, he thought, this is not right. I have to give up karela also. Then he started subsisting only on quinine. And you know what? The result was the same. Even something so bitter as quinine was invoking in him a great amount of rasa. He finally realized that it is not the giving up of food or any activity that is needed, What is needed is a controlled enjoyment. Very beautiful verse, chapter 2, verse 59. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina.
रसवर्जं रसोप्यस्य परं दृष्ट्वा निवर्तते.
Yes. Rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. If one abstains from food, the object of sense ceases to affect. But the affection, the attraction itself of the sense, the rasa still remains. Rasa ceases when? Only when the supreme is seen. Only when the highest rasa is experienced, the desire for the lower rasas falls off. Right?
Yeah.
Who will read out the 7th verse?
यस्त्विन्द्रियाणि मनसा नियम्यारभतेऽर्जुन कर्मेन्द्रियैः कर्मयोगम् असक्तः स विशिष्यते.
Beautiful. He who, controlling the senses by the mind, controlling the senses by the mind, O Arjuna, without attachment, engages with the organs of action in yoga of action, he excels. Now, the most important word here is niyamya, or controlling of the senses. The same control is spoken about again by Sri Krishna in the next verse. He says, Niyatam Kuru Karmatvam in the next verse. Now, unfortunately, this phrase has been totally misunderstood by 90% of the people who translate the 8th verse. Niyatam Kuru Karmatvam. This Niyatam is mostly misunderstood as if Sri Krishna is saying that do only your fixed and formal works. कि आपकी जो ड्यूटी है, जो आपके कर्म है, जो आपकी ड्यूटी से बंधे हुए कर्म है, बस वही कर्म आप करिए. Do only your fixed and formal works, works of sacrifices, as in Vedic yagyas and the daily needs of Vedic living. The Niyatam Kuru Karmani does not mean that. The Niyatam Kuru Karmani actually means not formal works fixed by an external rule. The Niyatam Kuru Karmani means the desireless works which are controlled by the liberated buddhi. Desireless works which are controlled by the liberated buddhi. This is what the Bhagavad Gita actually means by Niyatam Kuru Karmani. The Niyatam is not understood. So that is why I wanted to do the 7th verse and then stop. I want you all to read the 8th verse and its footnote before we proceed next time. Right? Does anybody have any questions? Please ask.
Actually, I think we are doing this after quite a while. Can you just explain once again the difference between Sankhya and Vedanta?
Okay, so this I said I'm going to do properly later on when I have created the paper. Basically, Sankhya is about the 24th. Sankhya says that Purusha is inactive. I'm telling you just a basic, huh? I will not be able to explain it till my paper is ready.
Okay.
Sankhya basically says that there is a Purusha. The Purusha is inactive.
Okay.
And Purusha is real. And there is not a Purusha, there are many Purushas. So, jitne log hain, utne Purushas hain. Right? And the Purushas are inactive. That is the real state of God.
Okay.
Prakriti is an independent activity that is going on. And Sankhya says that Purusha is inactive. But when Purusha glances at Prakriti which is in a state of equilibrium, it goes into a state of inequilibrium. Equilibrium is the equilibrium between Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, because Prakriti is action and action always has these 3 gunas. So the 3 are in absolute equilibrium, but when Purusha glances at Prakriti, they go into inequilibrium. And then Purusha gets entangled in it. Now, there's a self-contradiction. If Purusha is inactive, how can he glance? Right? So Sankhya has its own limitations. And Sankhya says the aim of life is to go back to the original state of Purusha, which is the state of inaction, which is the state which is Tathas. And that is what they call the state of Brahmic Sthiti, Sankhya calls it, right? So this is just very broad. But once little bit more my paper is ready, then I'll be able to
And
explain.
Vedant?
Vedanta actually is very difficult to explain because Vedanta has many, many streams. Vedanta has so many philosophers who've given different philosophies. The major one of them being Adi Shankara's Advait. That's part of Vedanta. Then there is Vishishta Advait. And there are many, many. Haji,
Vishishta Advaita Pramana.
Vishishta Advait. So we all believe in Vishishta Advait. And most of what Sri Aurobindo takes, I think he takes from Vishishta Advait. He also takes from Kashmir Shaivism. Because that invocation of Shakti, inviting Shakti into our being and trying to become that perfect instrument through which Shakti should flow, that Sri Aurobindo takes. And Sri Aurobindo takes from Vishishta Advait that the divine is there and I am there and I love the divine. And I love that oneness with him and yet that little separation from him. That is Vishishta Advait in very, very broad terms.
Somehow I misunderstood Advait and Sankhya. I thought Advait ki jo teachings hai, they are corresponding with Sankhya's teachings.
I mean, both of them lead towards a path of inaction, no?
Haan.
Advait also leads towards a path of inaction, and Sankhya also leads towards a path of inaction. So you found a similarity between them, which is there. You are not wrong in that, but it is not the be all. It is not they are not one philosophy. They are two completely different philosophies.
Oh, okay, so that's where I'm confused. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will end with the half a minute of silence. Yeah, and a gratitude to God for this session.